Herzlich willkommen im Video. Oh, auf Deutsch, auf Englisch müssen wir es ja machen. Das muss ich jetzt rausschneiden. Gut, dann machen wir es nochmal.
Doch, der erste Schnitt.
Welcome back in the Feed Your Brain podcast. My name is Max, and today we have a topic that definitely interests me a lot because we have definitely talked about it in the podcast a couple of times. And I think for not just my generation, but in general, this topic will be very relevant in the future. And today's guest is Dr. Petra Meyer, who is an expert for emotional intelligence, has also written a book about it, and is very deep on everything that's around team building, communication, mindful leadership, and in general, everything that covers organizations and how organizations work with the individuals that they have. And I think just to give a little context for the listeners, I think we have talked about it several times in the interviews that we had, but also in like the episodes that I did. I think in a world where teams are built even more quickly because there are more companies evolving and people just find different roles in different companies, and oftentimes culture gets lost in the way. And surely with artificial intelligence and AI in general, the whole process will definitely fundamentally change the way how we work. And I think emotional intelligence is just a great tool, and I would call it a tool to make things really work again and to really understand how AI and the human beings will work together. So I think Petra is a very interesting guest from that part, and happy to have you on the podcast.
Hello, Max. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm totally excited to be here.
Yeah, great. I mean, we have also had a couple of talks before, and we also had a very interesting and very warm pre-talk. And I think since emotional intelligence is such a relevant topic for I think all our generations because of the technology that we have, and if you have always been at the core of innovation with your innovation workshops and the different stuff that you also you started doing workshops at the beginning of the 2000s where actually innovation was just starting. So why did emotional intelligence inspire you so much back then, and why is it still relevant for you now? Maybe you can deep dive and give a little feedback on for you and also for the listeners.
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, that's true. My career started with innovation workshops, and I did lead user workshops for companies. And what I saw there that we've done fantastic stuff and created amazing things and super innovations that are actually long-term innovations, so not incremental ones, but really big ones like radical innovations. And people were excited at the workshop, but then they left into the company and not much happened.
Mm-hmm.
So the creativity that we actually sparked and created in workshops didn't last for a long time because there was so much resistance in the company towards that topic.
Mm-hmm.
And resistance, I mean, we can break it down, resistance towards change, and we know that 60 to 70% of change projects actually fail. And
60 to 70%. Wow.
yeah, this is Kotte's number. It's not my number, but there's lots of research on that. And I think this is quite interesting, and this is what caught my attention because, of course, there are some market issues. People are not ready for the product or whatever. But on the other hand, there might be also a lack of resources or budget. This can also happen.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, 60% towards fail in change is due to people in an organization.
Interesting.
And a friend of mine, Joshua Friedman, he actually says emotions drive people and people drive performance. And this is what I've experienced over the last 15 years. So when people are not engaged and they are not curious, they are not excited about what they are doing, it doesn't work. Or maybe it works, but performance is not as good as it could be.
Mm.
And this is how I got to emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is really being aware of yourself, but also being aware of your environment, like other people around you, and being aware of the context. And context can be, market situation, situation or structure or strategy in an organization, but then also be aware how is my approach towards that context, and how is my approach to other people, to my colleagues, to my leaders, to my followers.
Interesting. I mean, maybe just to give a number crunching here, I think especially because sometimes emotional intelligence seems to be something very vague, and it seems to be something that is maybe rather cloudy and that you can't really define it with like key facts. Are there like key numbers or key facts that you would support your arguments with, that emotional intelligence has definitely changed maybe how companies work? Or is there like a certain fact that you would like to name to give people a little direction where emotional intelligence can actually lead people? Or do you think it's more generally a cloudy thing that sometimes is part of a culture and sometimes it's not?
Well, there are two questions in there. And yes, emotional intelligence is sometimes part of a culture or not. Sometimes it's part of a conscious culture. Organizations really want to train it and look at it. And that's like the construct of emotional intelligence. You can actually measure it. It's not a soft construct or a cloudy construct. You can assess it, you can measure it, and you can develop it. And there's been lots of research on EQ. And in different areas, for example, in sales, when you do EQ trainings, EQ is short for emotional intelligence. If you do EQ trainings for salespeople, on average, their sales, how do you say? Yeah, their revenue.
Final, right?
The
Okay.
revenue, increases by around 18%.
Interesting.
Compared to the control group. And I mean, this is not bad. It's actually almost 1/5, of the revenue.
And that happens after you do like workshops with them, or when after, like, is it just like a measurement where people either have emotional intelligence or they don't, or is it so, or has it been measured before and then they compare people, or how was the measurement?
Yeah, exactly. So you measure it before, and then you work with the individuals, and then you see, okay, which areas would you like to develop to actually be more successful in your sales team, for example. And then people decide and say, okay, well, now after the test actually shows me that most people, or that's the feedback that I often hear, reflects my gut feeling. I think I had problems. For example, one salesperson said, I had trouble to connect with people. And connection is such an important thing, and trust in sales. We've got so many amazing products. They're very similar and they're very competitive. The prices usually are not much apart. But especially in high-end products that are quite expensive, emotional connection to the customer, to the client, plays a key role in sales. And this one guy, he said, I know my product and I can argue very, very well, but I still don't sell a lot because I don't get the empathy part right. I'm not really good with connecting with others. Something is stopping me here. And then we worked on that and we tried to develop that. This is like a process. It's human development. And for human development, people need to want it. You can't say, oh, you have to learn empathy because, this is our strategic plan now. That doesn't work. There must be, an excitement about it, curiosity, and you want to do it. And so we worked on the empathy part, and sales increased. So you asked, we test EQ before, and then we do the development, the personal development with exercises and mindfulness. And then we do the test again, and then we compare the sales numbers. And the amazing thing is it always works.
Amazing. So you actually really interact with, maybe just for the listeners that don't know, so you actually go into companies that think that emotional intelligence can be an advantage for them in regards to their sales process, maybe to their
Yeah,
general
definitely.
team building process. And so you're part of a consultant team that helps and really goes into the companies and establishes new elements and new features of emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, sales team is one, but another big thing is, as I said it before, it's team development.
Mhm.
If a team isn't connected and isn't excited about what they do, I mean, of course, they always have an aim, but there is so much trust or a lack of trust in teams nowadays. People don't trust each other. They are not connected to companies. They think about leaving before they actually talk about it. So, building trust and connected team on an emotional level is so much wealth for a company because
Mhm.
you can keep employees. You reduce the staff turnover, and as you know, I'm sure if a manager leaves the company, it costs a lot.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite expensive, and
Just because of the, you mean because they have to pay him or him or her certain money to leave the company, or do you
yeah,
mean
but it's
because
also
there are just external costs that also come in addition?
well, there's a drain of knowledge,
Mm.
and I
Oh,
think
okay, got it.
yeah, this is the if you leave to the competitor, I'm not even sure if you can measure that exactly,
Mhm.
but staff turnover is at the end of the day it's a lot of money. It's usually 1 to 2 wages per year.
Wow, interesting. I
Mm.
didn't know that. I mean,
Mm.
of course, what I think is interesting from that part. I don't know if you have listened to my interview before with Jerry Hark, who was the first Amazon Europe
Mm.
chef, and who also
Yeah.
worked closely together with Jeff Bezos back then. In I think it was like 10 years ago. And what he always said is that 15, 20 years ago, there was the human intelligence that decided whether you are a smart or not a smart kid, and it decided more or less which job you got. And now the human intelligence maybe gets less relevant because you can do everything online. You can learn everything online through certain degrees. And he said that emotional intelligence is going to be the main measurement for the future of understanding which people can get into which jobs. So emotional intelligence actually decides your career. And I think understanding that as a young person just going into their first job, I think that's very interesting and should give everybody the motivation to maybe understand emotional intelligence a little bit better and understand which impact it can possibly have on companies. And we're also talking about, I think, also talking about employer branding here. I mean, as you said, if a manager leaves, he of course also
Mm.
doesn't leave a legacy anymore, and he leaves something behind that people maybe can fulfill because they don't have the knowledge or the knowledge that maybe the manager had. So I think it's interesting to see how a company can definitely change based on people leaving the company and based on the emotional intelligence they leave behind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean it's quite interesting. I mean the World Economic Forum they proposed the top 10 skills in 2020, which is only like 1.5 years ahead. So we are
Mhm.
fastly approaching that. And they said EQ is one of the top 10 skills that we will need in 2020. And I'm sure I'm positive and yeah, I, I'm totally into that because I mean maybe what is EQ? It's really knowing about yourself. It's know how you tick, yeah, how you tick, but also how your team ticks or your leadership ticks or your company ticks. What's the glue between them? What holds them together? How do they connect with each other? And when you've got a certain part of connectedness, all of a sudden you can actually talk about problems, you can talk about creativity, you can talk about innovation, you can talk about leadership, what is really important to me, what is my purpose, for example,
Mhm.
and where would we like to go? How do we want to work together? What
Right.
is our aim? And I mean, this is the beauty of EQ because it really connects people with each other.
Right.
And it's not all just being happy all day and being there meditating or smoking or whatever. No, it's not. It's actually really concentrating on your work and on yourself. And I
And I
mean,
think maybe
Yeah.
that's something where we can deep dive a little, because I think that's super interesting for a lot of our listeners. Sometimes it's, I think, especially for young people, it's very difficult if they're just starting their career life to understand what they actually stand for, and what how they tick, how you say it, and what they are, and maybe what they're, just to be, I think, self-aware. I think that's something that seems to be even more difficult than deciding deciding about your career path. What would you recommend, also from, of course, your life experience, but also from your relation to the topic? How do people actually get self-aware? Do you think there's a method to it? Do you think that you can maybe give a little hack here that people can use to maybe get a little self-aware? How would you approach it?
I think EQ has got different competences, and it depends on the model that you like. I like a very simple one, which is actually proposed by 6 seconds, and one of the competences is know yourself, and knowing yourself includes emotional literacy, and emotional literacy is something where you actually know how you feel and you can name your emotions. And when you say "How are you?" we usually reply, "Oh yeah, good, thanks. How are you?" And that's it. But
Mhm.
um, if we really, I mean, emotions, they have a message
Right.
behind them. There's always a message to emotions. For example, um, if you're really happy or excited, what does it tell you? It tells you, it's probably good for you, and keep on going. Because our brain is wired for happiness,
Right.
and what makes us happy, we like to do. It's quite logical, isn't it? And on the other hand, when we are afraid of something, yeah, or we have pain, or there is anger or something, our brain tells us, "Hang on, there is a problem. Let's stop. We don't want to do that."
Mhm.
And so every emotion has got a message. And in order to access this message, you need to know, how do I really feel? And there's not always just one feeling, but there is, a cascade of feelings. I can be happy, but I can be sad again at the same time.
Mhm.
It really depends on my thoughts, what I would like to reinforce and where would I would like to go. And if I'm happy and afraid about a project, I should really look, okay, happy is a good feeling. I think, that's my gut feeling. Let's keep on in this innovation project or creativity project or whatever. Um, but of course, when you work with innovations or creativity or whatever, there's a lot of uncertainty involved as well. And this uncertainty or change evokes an emotion, for me, of being frightened,
Mhm.
because I like security as well.
Sure. I mean, probably everybody does, and it gives people to the warmth of actually feeling in the situation. And I think as soon as you maybe start feeling fear, or also maybe respect in regards to like a topic, I think that also
Yeah,
is a sign. I think fear can also be very powerful, right?
exactly. And then if I deep dive into that fear, I can really see, okay, um, I mean, if I'm not aware of fear, that fear is actually driving me, I tend to do certain things unconsciousness.
Mhm.
I tend to do, I say, no, don't do that. That's too risky. Yeah. Because the emotion is driving me. But if I name the emotion, then I tame it. If I feel, oh, okay, here is fear, um, my brain goes back to the rational side, and I can actually assess that fear quite rationally, not
Understand.
from my
Mhm.
emotional brain, but from a rational brain. And I can assess it. I can think about the risks, the opportunities, the advantages, the disadvantages, and we can really talk about it, bring it, from underneath the iceberg to the topic, and we can assess it. But if I'm driven by fear, and it's in my unconsciousness, so I'm not aware of it, that I'm actually frightened of this change, then I do things out of this emotion, and this is actually not always the best way to deal with it. So another definition of emotional intelligence is really use your emotional and your rational brain together.
Mhm. And would
So
you? would you write it down, or if you say that you should possibly name fear, would you take a pen and a pencil, or a pen and like a just a notebook or whatever, and write it down, or how would you approach fear to
I've
make it go to more to like the rational side of the brain?
yeah, I think it's first of all, it's really name this emotion. This emotional literacy. So what I've got, I just Google emotions, or I have a list in my pocket actually of these 25 emotions or 30 emotions, whatever you prefer. And if I'm unsure, how do I feel? And I think, I'm doing things in autopilot, automatically. I don't reflect much because it's a stressful day and I have to make decisions, and I'm going, and I came late into the office. So it wasn't a very successful day. So I'm doing things out of emotion, not reflecting a lot on my doing.
Mm.
So then I just, I go to the toilet, I have a coffee break or whatever, take out this little sneaky piece of paper and look at the emotions, and then I just go through it and say, what do I feel right now? And then I write it down on a piece of paper, or I just look at it, I highlight it, and then I see, okay, this is my mix of emotions right now. And then I see, okay, which of these emotions I would like to deep dive a little bit in there, which are supporting my actions and which are actually stopping me from doing the next right step.
Is there like any resource that you would recommend in that regard to maybe understand the different emotions there are? Like, is that in your book, or do you think there's any other great resource where people can deep dive a little on the different emotions that there are in the world, and how they maybe can also write it down in like a little notebook that you have?
Um, I mean, a nice tool is actually, it's called feeling magnets. So it's a little box of magnets, and these magnets, they've got feeling names on there, and then you can just, it's like play, it's like a game, you can pick that and put the magnets on your fridge, or in this little box, and then you can see the magnets. Or another thing is the blue chick wheel. That's also very interesting because it tells you the intensity of an emotion. If you're disgusted by something, you probably have a basic emotion of fear or anger in that. So
How,
it also tells you the intensity. So that's
how was
the
the last one called?
pardon?
How was the last one called? Blue Chick Wheel?
Blue chick wheel. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly. Yeah.
got it. Okay,
So that's a good one as well. Yeah,
great. I will. No, go ahead.
because it also shows you, how intense is the emotion at the moment, and the more
Hmm.
intense, um, the more aware you should be of this emotion, because it drives you. It drives you, and we all know that. If we are angry, we react without thinking, and that's good. It helps us, or it helped us survive in the past. But the question is, was it the right decision that we do?
Right. And
And
that's
on the other
something.
hand,
Mhm.
yeah, on the other hand, if we are really, really, really happy or blindly in love, we also know that this can lead to certain issues in your life.
Totally agree. I mean, I think just to have like a certain guideline that you can approach if you have certain emotions, whether it's love, fear, or maybe happiness, I think it's cool to have some sort of tool that gives people maybe a little direction in case they are a little stuck. I mean, especially if you talk
Mhm.
about love, people are very stuck in their little dimension. I think if you are in love or whatever, I think it maybe help to have like a rational perspective on stuff like that, and maybe also from like a company perspective. I think especially if you talk emotions, and if you compare to culture and leadership and how the different stuff is happening at the moment, that just things are moving way quicker now, and that of course culture and leadership gets even more relevant in the fast world that we live in,
Mhm.
which from like also from like the consultancy projects that you have been through, what kind of shifts have you observed in the industry, in the company industry in general, maybe around the globe, but also in your specific project, in regards to culture and leadership? Are there like specific things that you have observed maybe in today's age?
Um, yeah, I mean, what you can see, it's quite an interesting question, actually. I can totally see the change towards AI. artificial intelligence. So people are more aware of actually finding employees and hiring employees that can do the creative stuff. The creative stuff that's where you can actually use your mind and your creativity to create the world and shape the future.
Right.
And I think people like this. And in organizations, I see mindful leadership is the thing that's on top of the list at the moment, because especially the younger generations, they are more aware of values, what really drives me. They want to see a purpose in what they do. What they do should make sense. So this is actually coming into companies, and companies pick this up. And so value-based leadership is a big topic at the moment, and also what makes an organization really vital. How can we train and attract and retain people
Right.
stay with us? And trust is another big thing. How can we create trust in organizations? How can we work with empathy? Yeah. Recently, I saw quite a funny, a lady was coming. No, it was actually a businessman, in a black suit. He was coming into the office, having his angry face on, and that was on a picture. And underneath it said, "Sorry, I'm late. I got stuck with happiness at home." So, so I think organizations are much more aware that you should actually have fun at work. And if you have fun at work, it's much easier. You've got less stress. You can make decisions easier. It's easygoing, and people actually like it. Like going to work.
Especially, I think if you talk about AI, I just had like a little interview a couple of days ago where I also said that AI actually gives people more freedom, maybe in the long term. I also talked to an expert who's going deeper in the AI field, and he said that AI will fundamentally change actually the amount of numbers that we work. Now people work 8 to 10 hours a day. AI may help that we only work 4 to 6 hours a day, and the other 4 hours that usually worked, we have more time for freedom. We have more time for spare time. We can spend more time with the family, with friends, or with maybe own projects that we love. So I think it will definitely happen that there will be different shifts happening in regards to working hours. And I think if people can maybe have more time spending, or if they can spend more time with the people they love and with the people they appreciate, I mean, that's amazing, and AI can definitely help.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that as well. No, I'm positive that this will happen. Yeah.
Because maybe one question maybe here, because we also talked about the organizational part here. You're also part of. You are also lecturing at different universities. What do you observe from like the student perspective? What do they think about AI? What do they think about how leadership will change? Do you think they already have it on their mind that there will be lots of stuff happening in the world of emotional intelligence and also in the world of culture in companies, or do you think it's still not in the minds of young people?
I mean, what I do see is that they get hooked on EQ. It really interests them. They get a sense of mindfulness because they know they are so distracted by their phone, by their environment, by so many things. We are multitasking all the time. So there is a desire for simplicity, basically. And mindfulness can teach you that. Go back to yourself, center yourself, ask yourself, what is the next right step right now? And then make a decision. But it must be from the center, from yourself. It doesn't help if you're crazy spinning around and say, oh, what is the next right step? That doesn't work. And we try to offer, we have, or what I teach is a course called Development Rooms, because what we would like to provide, a room for personal development, even when you study. And the thing is, students are quite young, so they don't have this life experience, and sometimes they don't even have working experience. So this is a little bit challenging for me in, in regards of teaching, but I'm getting there. I'm positive. And what I also see, and I think we really have to work on that, is our system, our school system doesn't prepare for creativity. They don't prepare for innovation. They don't prepare for emotional intelligence. Nothing. And they even don't prepare for artificial intelligence. No, this is completely ignored, and it's lacking there. And there are no teachers saying, how do you program, or programming, yes, but how do we really cope with robots in the future of work? Nothing. This is totally lacking. And I think students are trained. So when they come to university, at least in Central Europe, they're trained. And I'm very critical here. I know there are some exceptional schools that do it differently, but most of our system, they still do learning by heart, having a test at the end of the day. There is no room for creativity because it's either right or wrong. And I know it's hard. Creativity is hard because it's hard to measure, really. And it's not like maths. It's not like right or wrong. You have to experience it. And only afterwards, in the long run, you see whether it worked or not. And this is another thing. We don't we don't allow students or young people to fail. Have you ever failed in your life? I have failed many times.
Definitely, sure. Yeah.
I've learned a lot from failing. And I think in our society, in this European, Central European, German, Austrian, maybe Swiss, I don't know, context, we're so trained to be perfect. Everything must be right. And there is no room for mistakes. But we need this room for mistakes because there is innovation, there is creativity, if you reflect on it.
Right. I think what I find interesting here is that you observed already that there is something lacking in the university system, and I can totally agree as a student that we are not prepared for creative work. And I think if you want to produce creative work, you have to really understand creativity, and you have to maybe also talk to different creative leaders around the globe to understand how they actually measure their projects. I mean, there are different creative agency directors who just work on a creative day-to-day basis, and I think how they actually measure their work, you can definitely observe how the difference is between the work that they do and between the stuff that we learn at university. And as you said there, we talk a lot about perfection, and of course almost no company is perfect in any way, and also no person is perfect in any way. When you observe companies, what do you think, when do companies need to change culture and organizational development, and of course also then emotional intelligence with the people? Is there like a certain moment when people or when companies should react in regards to culture and the whole emotional intelligence part, or do you think it just happens over time?
Well, I think it really depends how you define culture. And for me, is culture, how do we want to work together? It's one part of culture. How do we want to interact together? So it's all about or a lot is about the people side, not just, but it's the people side in organizations. And what I can see is, strategy is always there, the budget is always there, that works. But thinking about people, how do they work together? That's lacking very often. And companies start to think about culture and culture development when there is a lot of pain, and they have high staff turnover. They don't find people, and that's a big issue at the moment, and will be even a stronger issue in future. And then they start to think about culture, but not before. And that's very sad because, a lot of money has gone down the drain until then, that point. So I think you should always be aware. It doesn't matter whether you're a startup or, an international organization or a little SME. Think about, how do we want to work together? What is our aim? What is our purpose? How do we connect with each other? How do we build trust? What is our goal?
Right.
And then it works.
And then I think also defining it. I think Ryan Carson also maybe I don't know if you know the book, but I think it's Stephen
Yeah.
Covey who published a
Mhm.
book about trust. I'm not sure how it's exactly called, but Ryan Carson, who I had in the show a couple of weeks ago, he also mentioned how trust is actually the main element for his company.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely. Mhm. So trust, I mean, there's been a popular article in the Harvard Business Review, I think it was last year. Let me just see whether I can find it quickly, tell you the right numbers.
sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's from 2017, yeah, by Zach.
Mhm.
And he
How's it
had,
called?
um, good question.
Maybe just tell me after the interview, and I will
Yeah, I
integrate it
will.
into the show
Yeah,
notes for everybody
yeah,
that's interested in
yeah.
reading it.
Yeah, I've just looked at the numbers before. So when you actually have trust in a company, and you compare a company with high trust towards a company, or with a company having low trust, so you can measure trust actually. Yeah. So comparing companies with high trust and companies with low trust, um, then you can see a higher trust creates less stress, of course.
Mhm.
But it also creates more energy at work, more productivity. It creates less sick days, less burnout, which is also quite clear. And it creates more engagement, more commitment, and more general happiness in life. And I think, just talking about it, you really want it. I mean, I would
Mhm.
like that. I would like to be connected and work, be productive, be successful. It's like a positive wheel of change. That works, and it's easygoing.
Right.
And it's that I think this is a desire that we all have, and this is what I try to establish in companies as well. Get this connectedness, work with trust as a leader, as an employee in a team, and just create happiness for your company, success for your company, but also in private life for your employees.
Right. And what we often talk about in that regard is also, I think, productivity, because I think what trust also does is that people work more productive and more efficient. And
Mm-hmm.
I just love to think about being efficient in every possible way. And I'm aware that efficiency shouldn't be overthought, because of course everybody thinks about, okay, which tool should I use? How should I
Yeah.
how should I how should I use my first 60 minutes of the day? And of course people are very maybe also going a little too far in everything in regards to like effectiveness and efficiency. Still, I think just the points that you mentioned, they have a huge impact on the effectiveness of a company. We also
Mm.
talked about it a little bit in our last call, I think. And do you think, from the perspective that you bring into companies, are there like clear methods for being more effective in regards to the topic that you discussed?
Clear methods for being more effective. I think the effectivity or effectiveness comes from being more aware, more mindful, and having more connectedness to people. And then you can
Hmm.
actually measure it. You can see it in
And do you
happiness of people, but also in numbers. You can measure it in numbers. Less conflicts, productive conversations where you can actually negotiate things, not based on emotions, or I want. It's not the IQ. It's the WQ. It's about us. It's not about me. And once people get away from an ego thinking, I have to be successful, I want to be the best in this company or whatever. When it gets towards a we, let us be successful. Yeah, let us work together.
right?
Then you have effectiveness boosting up. Yeah.
And do you think there are certain routines that people or a company should use in order to make teams more effective? Do you think there is, like, of course, everybody knows, like, a Monday stand-up meeting that people or companies use? Or do you think there are any routines that help to make companies more effective?
Um, well, I think if a company wants to be more effective, it's a company is like a system of people at the end of the day.
Mm.
And I'm always talking about the people side. Of course, there are other sides as well, but I'm keen on this people side. And Otto Scharmer, he said, to make a team sense and see itself. And I think this is a beautiful sentence, because when you actually make a company sense, so feel, know who you are, who is in your company, what are the potentials, but also what are the threats in your organization from a people side, and threats can be, we all know that we've got a right part of the brain and the left part of the brain. We've got this emotional and this rational side. We've also got this visionary and this practical side. We've also got a long-term thinking and the short-term thinking side. So we've got lots of opportunities and threats and challenges there. So, for example, if we've got a team that's hooked up by people who work really practical, they like to get things done in the short term. They get their energy, their motivation from doing things. But what's lacking in that team is actually the visionary part, the long-term part, the innovative part, the creativity part. And if an organization is not aware of that, you're running in a certain direction, and that can be a threat. And by making this organization sense and see itself, see what are the advantages, but also what are the disadvantages in terms of the capacity that people have and bring in, from a brain neuroscience perspective. When you can see that and bring it to the top, you can actually work with it. And then, when you hire people, look for someone who's really visionary. But then if you get this visionary person into your team, protect it, because the others don't like it. They won't like it. If you're practical and you want to get things done, you don't think about, or not so much about the long run, because it's not part of your brain. It's not that what you prefer and what you like. It doesn't mean that you can't do it, but your brain prefers to do it short term and practically and hands-on. Whereas, if your brain is more hooked on the visionary side, you are not so keen on doing stuff, but you're keen on creating stuff. But you can see there is a certain, how do you say? I can't think of the word right now, but there's a certain Spannung, a certain tension between those two topics. But an organization needs both of them. You need the long-term and you need the short-term thing, for example. And also you need people in your organization who are good on the emotional side, because they connect people. They know how they feel. They bring flowers in the morning and a cake for a birthday.
Right.
But then you also need the rational people who know the numbers are right. Yeah. The strategy is right. So you need both. But these people usually don't like to work with each other so much, because they don't understand each other very well.
No, which totally makes sense. I mean, it's a completely different world if you are just like a very people-focused person or more like an analytical person. And but I think that's the core of leadership now, to bring those people together. And as you mentioned, one of definitely the leaders and thought leaders in that process is also Otto Scharmer, who is a very famous professor at MIT. And has also lectured at actually my university before, here at University of Wittenherdecke. So that's the reason why I know him also. He actually had different books that was written about the topic. And maybe as we are mentioning him, maybe do you have 3 book recommendations that you would recommend in regards to the topics that we discussed, or generally maybe can also be totally unknown from the field that you're working in, but maybe that books that have inspired you in general? Are there like 3 books that you would recommend in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like Otto Scharmer's you theory, and I mean, he actually says that, make a system sense and see yourself, and that's so at the core of our organizations and of our society. Just know yourself, see yourself, and then choose yourself. The what, how, and why do we work together, or be together, or go together on holidays or whatever. Right. So you can really apply that to every part of our society. And the theory you book from Otto Scharmer is perfect. I recommend that totally, because it also tells you, how mindfulness can actually support your organization.
Right.
And mindfulness is not a spooky thing or esoteric or something. No, it's in the core of ourselves. It's being, and this is what we all would like to do, or be, just be. That's one book. I'm also a big fan of Simon Sinek. So he's got the Why book series. So any of them I can highly recommend. Know your why, and where you're going. He also says he also has a very nice quote about emotions. He says, the value of emotions comes from sharing them, not just having them. And he says, yeah, emotions are, they are like vomit. If you hold it back too long, it's messing up. So, I mean, this is what he says, but it's true. If you share your emotions, you can actually work better, you can connect better, you can think better. Know your emotions, name them, and you tame them, and that goes into both, into happiness, or also into fear emotions, in both ways.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah. So this is a book that I would recommend. And then, of course, I recommend my own book.
Sure. That will definitely become in the show notes as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. And I also like the book Search Inside Yourself by Cheng Meng Dang. He's the guy who did this Search Inside Yourself courses at Google, and also created the Search Inside Yourself Institute in the US. And I think he just really shows very well in his book how mindfulness and emotional intelligence work together for the sake of people and for the sake of organizations.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. I will definitely put all of them in the show notes, and I can definitely also recommend everybody in the listener base to check out your book. I have also received it, and I think it's just a very interesting view on emotional intelligence. And then for everybody that wants to deep dive a little more on the topic, I can definitely recommend it. And I think it's going to be a major element of how we as human beings work together. I think emotional intelligence will decide whether we come along with people or not, and whether we can actually lead teams. So can definitely recommend all of them. The books that you mentioned, I also know all of them, and I can only also recommend your book, of course. So Otto Scharmer, Simon Sinek, and also the book Search Inside Yourself. And fantastic. Maybe for people that want to get a little bit more into the topic and want to learn more about the work that you do, and maybe the projects that you're working on, how can people possibly connect to you? Because since I think the topics that you covered are super interesting for every company and every leader. So maybe how can people connect?
I think the best way is Facebook or LinkedIn. So I always do updates there about my work, or post interesting articles or something like that. I'm currently in the processing of reshaping my company website, and that's called onpurpose.at. It's not online yet. It's under construction, because this is a work that I don't like to do very much. To create websites, but or through this email address, Petra.Meyer @onpurpose.at. Yeah, I'm happy to connect and share and discuss and get ideas and feedback on the interview. I'd love that. Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. I can only recommend maybe for everybody that listened to the interview, if you liked it, maybe share it with your friends, and also tag Petra and I, so we get aware of people listening to it. That would be great. And besides that, Petra, thanks a lot for the amazing interview. I enjoyed it a lot, and would love to stay in touch.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Max. It was really exciting. Thank you for your great questions. And I hope I could share something that was of interest for the one or other person of your listeners.
Definitely. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you, Max. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Take
Cheers.
care. Bye.